this is Fun with Research, and I am Susan Beyer. Today we're going to talk about a question that I got this week on funwithresearch.com. Go check it out if you have questions. But the question I got this week was about how to segment the respondents that you got in a particular survey. So now you have your data and you're sort of doing all your crunching and looking at the results. And how do you group people together? That's all segmenting is sticking people into buckets. There are a whole bunch of different ways to do it. Some may make better sense for you in a given situation than others. But this question is, how should we look at that now that we have our data? So you really have two options here. Number one is to segment the respondents based on the things that you can see that are plain to the eye in the survey. So, for example, you might want to segment them by gender, right? You can see based on a question that you asked in the survey what their gender is, so that you can look at the respondents who said they're male versus the answers of the respondents who said they're female, and look for differences or whatever. You can do this with income, all those kinds of things. If you have a question like that in the survey, you can segment them on whether they've bought your product or not. So maybe this is a question you asked in the survey, or maybe you've appended their information so you know who got each survey, and you can connect that to the data that you have in your own database about them and differentiate the people who are buyers versus prospects. Or maybe you just sent a different survey link to your buyers than you sent to your prospects. So based on the link they used in the survey, you can see the differences between their responses. So that's your first option. Group them into buckets based on what is clearly visible to the naked eye when you look at your survey responses. Your other option is to do analysis on your data that can reveal options for segmenting your respondents that aren't easily visible to the naked eye, that require some analysis to see. So for example, you might do some correlation or regression analysis that shows you something that you can't tell just by looking at the data sort of with the human eye. So you might be surprised by running some correlations to find that people who have a pet are much more likely to have spent more on their recent RV that they bought than people who don't have a pet. And that might not be something you would have looked for because you sort of own assumptions didn't suggest that those would be related. And maybe even if you looked at them, you couldn't tell whether that was a really statistically reliable relationship between those two things. You might do what we do at Audience Audit, which is attitudinal segmentation, which means that based on a variety of things that they've provided answers to in the survey, when you crunch all that data together, you see groups arising that are connected because of how they feel about a group of attitudes, about a set of things. And that's certainly not something that you would be able to see with the naked eye. It's something that requires some advanced statistical analysis to do. So those are your two options in terms of how you segment people. But the real question, I think, that we need to be asking is, why are we segmenting people? And typically, the answer to that question is because we want to do a better job with something, right? We want to do a better job with our sales outreach. We want to be more relevant in our marketing messaging. We want to try to develop products that are designed for specific groups of people in our audience and trying to help them solve a problem that they're having, etc. And segmenting our audience, whether it's customers or prospects or both, makes it easier to do that. So the question you really need to think about is, does segmenting by gender help you, right? What implication does that have for your marketing? Now, if you are a clothing company, then it may make sense to differentiate buyers who are men versus those who are women. But then again, that assumes that they're only buying for their own needs and maybe not buying for a spouse or a partner or a kid or somebody else who's a different gender. So maybe not so helpful. Does generation matter? Whether they're Millennials or Gen X, is that really something that's going to help you? What are you going to do with that information? There are some situations where your segmentation could make a big difference. For example, if you have attitudinal segments and you know that one group really looks at going out to eat as a special treat on infrequent occasions, and when they do that, they really want to go all out, versus people who really view going out as not a big deal and something they do quite a bit, and they are willing to explore and even sort of go cheap some nights and just do takeout or something, fast food or whatever. You'd want to know the difference between those folks if you're a restaurant, because it's going to change how you are talking to them and the kinds of things that you're offering for them. You may have a sales organization that is divvied up based on industry or company size or those things, and so they really need to sort of understand the people that it is their responsibility to sell to. So it may make sense for you to break your respondents down into things like their role in their organization or title, or the industry that they're in, or how big their company is, or something like that. So lots of ways to slice and dice, and sometimes segmenting sounds, very sexy and appealing, but I think what you really need to think about is why you're doing it and how it can help you, and that can help guide you when you look at analyzing your data. Unfortunately, some of the easiest ways to segment people, like demographics, are often not very helpful, especially for marketing. So even though it's easy to do, the question is that really pointing us in a direction that's going to make our efforts to serve our communities, our customers, and our prospects any better? So I hope that helps. If you have any questions, please go to Fun with Research. There's a form there where you can submit a question, and I will answer it on an upcoming show. And you can go to funwithresearch.com. You'll find all of these videos with longer posts about the topic, and you'll also find some free downloads just for helpful things if you're thinking about research or trying to figure out what it would cost you to get respondents or whatever. So we'll see you next Friday on funwithresearch.com. Thanks for coming.